Good evening and welcome to yet another session with MedicinMan. As part of our 10th anniversary celebrations, we are hosting a series of CEO Roundtable, and today will be the third in the series of Pharma CEO Roundtables with Sanjiv Navangul delivering the keynote address along with the galaxy of panel members. So as you can see, we have put together a very fine panel of people to talk on the impact of digital on patient care. This is the third in the series, as I said earlier, and let me quickly take you over to give you an overview of the earlier CEO roundtables that we've had. We just finished one with Rajaram Narayanan, the Managing Director of Sanofi, delivering the keynote address on engaging doctors, physical, digital, and hybrid, translating strategy into action. And we had Atish Majumdar, the President of Mankind Pharma, and Shirish Sahai, the CEO of Wolters Kluwer, and Praful Akali, the Founder and Managing Director of Medulla Communication, as the panel members. This was an excellent discussion, which is still available for you to view. All you have to do is register on the MedicinMan website, and we will email you the link that is available to view the CEO Roundtable, which will really enlighten you on the challenge of translating strategy into action when it comes to engaging doctors through physical, digital, and hybrid models. And the second CEO roundtable that we've had, also on the same theme of engaging doctors, digital and hybrid, translating into action, because this is a subject that requires much thinking, because it is not just using digital, but actually bringing about a transformation of your organization. So we had Dr. Mahendra Naik, the area head for Takeda Pharmaceuticals for the ICME region. We had Prakash Maheshwari, the Vice President of Glenmark. We had Dr. Peter Velev, the founder of CredoWeb and CEO of EcoFarm. Saurav Agarwal, the Vice President, Sales and Marketing at Lupin Global. And our team members, Salil Kallianpur and Praful Akali as the panel members. So all these three CEO roundtables, including the current one, will be available to you on registering on MedicinMan website. So today we are here to discuss the impact of digital on patient care. So let me quickly introduce you the keynote speaker and the panel members. Sanjiv Navangul is a well-known figure in the Indian pharma for over 3 decades. He has been contributing not just to the organization that he has worked with, but to the industry as a whole. Sanjiv Navangul is a respected pharmaceutical healthcare management professional. Under his leadership, a host of global pharmaceutical companies have achieved operational success. His mentorship and contribution towards a value-based culture is widely acknowledged by business leaders. In his diverse career span of 30 years, Sanjiv has experienced entrepreneurship and also served on the board of Johnson & Johnson Private Limited India and Fulford India. Sanjiv has been the winner of several industry awards on public health, marketing, and diversity. He has served as the Vice President of OPPI, has been a chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce. Apart from these commendations, he has served on the academic board of NMIMS Pharma Management, IES Management School, and IIHMR. And he has been earlier the business unit head at Baxter Healthcare, the managing director for MSD at Philippines, and the managing director for Janssen India. Then we have Aparna Mittel, who has been doing a lot of work in the area of patient centricity. Aparna can be best described as an entrepreneur with a passion for improving healthcare through patient and caregiver engagement. A senior business leader with over 20 years in technology and business management, her strategies and contributions have delivered consistent business growth. Having successfully managed vertical industries like life sciences, financial services in the recent past, she has also a significant experience in high-tech manufacturing, telecom, and non-profit sector. Prior to founding PatientsEngage, Aparna was the Vice President, Southeast Asia, India, and Strategic Accounts at Segedim Dendrite. Sudip Chakraborty is the Head of Strategic Engagement and Neurology Network Europe at UCB Pharma. He has more than 25 years of pharma industry working across geographies and roles. His current work includes go-to-market strategy, real-world experience, HEOR, external network engagements, digital health, and business plans and pilots. So he's the ideal person to talk about digital transformation and patient centricity. He has earlier spoken on the topic, and that is available for you to view on CredWeb. Amlesh Ranjan is the Deputy Director, Super Specialty at Sanofi. Amlesh Ranjan is a life sciences professional in a business leadership role. His illustrious career is built on robust foundations of frontline sales management. A thought leader, Amlesh has been contributing at the international and national industry forum as a speaker for more than a decade now. And finally, Salil Kallianpur, a very familiar face for all of us who are on the digital media. Salil Kallianpur has been on the editorial board of MedicinMan since inception, contributing a lot through articles and interviews with industry professionals, as well as doing workshops in enabling pharma professionals to make sense of digital and adopt digital in their organizations. So let's go now quickly to listen to what Sanjiv Navangul has to say in his keynote address, Impact of Digital on Patient Care. Over to you, Sanjiv.
Hello, everyone. I think I must thank Anup and Salil to continuously call me over on every forum. It's fun to talk to a group of people who have dedicated considerable amount of the last 10 years in trying to tell the industry to move. And yeah, industry is worse sometimes than an elephant, where it takes a lot of pressure to move. Yeah, but coming to the topic today, I think it is sometimes situations, events make people think where they are and what they do. And in the last year and a half, two big things have happened for the industry. One is that awareness of healthcare, or as I call as health literacy, is clearly rising in the last 1.5 years. People are, even if it is good or bad information, people are trying to seek information on health. And the second thing that has happened is companies or the pharmaceutical industry has been forced to rethink where do they go from here. And very quickly to say why I say this is that over a period of time, the way the ecosystem is evolving and the areas where technology is starting to intervene and interfere in a way, we find that segments of things that the pharma industry always thought they owned chunks are being taken away. And those chunks are getting heavier and heavier. So if those chunks continue the way they are, pharmaceutical industry will remain a supply chain company. And that is probably the only role they can play after some time if they continue in a particular way. So industry therefore has had to revisit everything and say, okay, where do we go from here? One of the very quick reflex, in a way, Pavlovian response has been that how do we create an ecosystem between doctor and the rep and their interaction? Because it had to be replaced by technology to some extent. Not realizing that probably that model itself is not required probably in future. And it is taking some time for everybody in the industry to realize that that model probably is a model which is dead, but we are flogging a dead horse because there is no alternate model which has been created properly. What also it has done is companies have had to start thinking about what do their products mean and to whom. And as they have started to think through, one of the things that senior management that is happening is the fact that now there is much more awareness that you are in this business because you make a change to the patient. And the patient no longer is behaving like a patient. I think this is another big transformation that we are seeing because of digital age, is that patient is also behaving like a consumer. See, imagine an industry where our customer and consumer were different people, but our consumer always behaved like an obedient patient who went to the doctor and agreed to whatever the doctor said. No longer, no longer. I think the patient is now trying to be a consumer and saying why this and why that. Sometimes with information which is half baked, sometimes which is information which is wrong, but at the same time, that transformation journey of a patient to a consumer is not stopping. And therefore, there is even more need now as we go along to understand that this is something which is here to stay, and companies will have to evolve their strategy in such a fashion that they understand that ultimately this consumer is going to ask questions of them and demand solutions out of them. So if that is the case, will companies look at a demand driven model or really reach out and try and think that it is their duty to get ahead and reach the consumer? Three things probably are very important for an organization. I'm talking a lot more on organizational level because probably because there are experts like Aparna, Amlesh, and Sudip here, it would be useful for me to talk about what would be from a company point of view important. Three things are getting very important. One is the cultural change that is required in an organization, that forget digital, talking about digital as a medium, start thinking about digital as a way of life and strategy for yourselves. Because I think beyond all that things that we did before. The second is technology is not just an enabler, but technology is the very basis of sometimes managing your business and reaching out to your stakeholders. So that transformation also is, I think, we required, and that is trying to get into the company strategy rooms. And also because of that, companies have had to start to draw stakeholder maps. Earlier for the company, it was the doctor, the hospital, or some connected network that would become important. But today the stakeholder map could become much deeper, and you are in a position because of technology, and I'm in a position because of technology to integrate a lot of forces. I think if I, as a company, is providing a solution to a patient, let's say there is an orthopedic surgery, I can certainly connect a diagnostic company, a device company, myself, doctors, and somebody else. We can connect everybody together to help the patient. And that's possible because of technology. So the stakeholder map is considerably changing, and companies will have to draw those out properly now. And the third thing is, you don't try and change everybody in the company at one go and say that from tomorrow the East is this way. It doesn't happen. What you need to do is start incubating a senior management startup ecosystems in a company. And I mean startup ecosystem from an attitude point of view, that if business had to be done completely differently, that currently whatever way we are doing business will not be done. If it has to be done in some other way, how will it be done with the enablement of technology? You have to invest in that for the next few years. Let's not talk about an investment for next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, which is where Indian industry has always been impatient. They will say, I'm investing today, and they will ask return, where is the return yesterday? So that's not the behavior that is going to help you through. So how do we ensure that team is enabled to ensure that they start looking at solutions in a very, very different way? And I'm not talking out of the hat, I'm doing it myself. I have incubated a team of about 7, 8 people who have nothing else on their plate. who do nothing else but only focus on trying to see what is the new business model that should emerge for tomorrow, which will enable the company to not look a supply chain company, but look like a solution provider. And then if there is an architecture of technology that we need to build, then what kind of architecture we need to build? And then it becomes slightly gigantic. In a way, the forces that you need are much bigger. So imagine, you have an interface where you literally for information and knowledge, you are the Netflix of a particular therapy. Imagine that you are the exchange where if consumer and a patient wants to deal with a doctor or a nurse or a counselor or just somebody who is another patient, how do you build those ecosystems to get everybody together? And for that to do, the architecture required is completely different than what we have talked before. But is this out of the hat story? Is this something that you can think and imagine? I have always lived in that world to think that, look, you should imagine these things, they happen. As I think I used to talk about $100 billion product in 2007, where the chairman of a global company accused me of smoking something, but the product did become $100 billion by 2050. So these things happen. You have to dream about them, understand why it will be, and back those ideas and start to think about why things would happen in a particular way. Also, very brand centric thinking we have had over the years, and we have been trained to think brand. And we have been told that, if you make mega brands, if you build big brands, you will survive, and that is success, which is true, which is not untrue. But tomorrow's world is not going to just rely on the brand. Tomorrow's world is also relying on what is the brand definition. We used to learn in textbooks of marketing that there is a core product, and there is services, augmented product. All those are becoming a reality for us, even in a pharmaceutical brand, besides its chemical or biologic impact, that what it serves. And therefore, brand look at strategy versus a therapy look at strategy or a treatment look at strategy is again something that has to enter the strategy rooms very strongly. Because today, treatment maps will become more important than yesterday. Today, therapy outlook will become more important than yesterday. And therefore, I need not own everything. I need not be all encompassing, but I can provide a solution by partnering a lot of people. The world where technology can manage things, there are non-industry people who are already entering that. While we with expertise are losing out because we are not able to join hands with people who are trying to do this. The amount of battle we are having on what an e-pharmacy does, for example, is unnecessary for us. It doesn't matter, laws will be framed, there will be regulations that will be done properly, there will be market shakeup, all that will happen as a natural existence issue. But we focus too much on how it is going to change the market versus how can we deliver better care to patients. There are many therapy areas where you know that outcomes are dependent on how you handle patients. And look, we are seeing a very different world. We have now reached a point of equilibrium in chronic care, where that chronic diseases have reached a particular point and the incidence might not change or prevalence may not change beyond a point. The number of patients will keep growing. The research in those areas are starting to decline in terms of newer chemical entities. You see it in hypertension, you see it in diabetes. This is happening. I'm just giving very simple examples. But it is not the same in every other area. Acute therapies are again regaining ground because we are seeing that infectious diseases are again gaining ground. And therefore, there are many areas where technology is trying to give different solutions. I'll give you a simple example is that you want to be an oncology company. Today, predictive oncology is necessary to treat patients. Earlier, it was, the spindle poisons which were used to treat. Chemotherapy is chemotherapy has its own issues, but now you have immuno-oncology, you have certain other ways of treating targeted medicine. Now, all this, if you add to predictive oncology, you can actually stage gate patients in such a way to understand that what will work with patients. And it is not far off. It's about another, I would say, another 8 to 10 years where you would treat oncology much, much better than the way it is. And if that is going to happen, imagine a company which is in oncology, what kind of technology it will have to use to ensure that they are relevant to the consumer or the patient. And if that is not done, then you will remain a research-driven supply chain company. That's all that you will do, and that's fine. I think if you want to position yourself that way, it's not something that is a bad position or something, but that is where you will be. So I gave this one example is basically because this is where the world is moving. The earlier as companies we try and adopt, the better. The fall rate in the industry is going to get higher because companies which have no differentiation, which have no access to doctors, because let's say situations might emerge where doctor might stop access, physical access in many places, will start to not know what to do. White labels will increase because of the pharmacy, e-pharmacies and the big chains that will come in. So this is a big churn that is happening. So at the core, at the center where good companies are working, who have big relevance, they will have to start thinking about everything very, very differently. And why I'm talking about this is basically because ultimately this now from today, the consumer, the patient is going to drive you to change behavior. No longer you are able to get away by saying, I will produce something and give it to you and please consume. And that is patient centricity at its maximum. That ultimately behavioral change is starting to be driven by the patients. It happened in breast cancer in the US and we never learned out of it. It is happening now. The earlier we digest it, the better, and companies start developing strategies based on this. Let me stop here, but clearly I can see this happening. And if we don't want to change, we will not be left behind, but we will be closed up. So it is that close to change that we are now seeing. That it is a survival story. Hopefully, our industry takes note of it and changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjiv. Those are very insightful remarks that you have made and a lot of food for thought. So let me request Salil to just sum up the highlights for our audience so that they have some take-home lessons from the keynote itself before we go to the panel discussion. Over to you, Salil.
Thank you, Anup. It's always a pleasure to hear Sanjiv speaking because his views are quite revolutionary and quite ahead of time. I have had the opportunity of hearing him on many forums, and he's been quite consistent about the fact that the industry must do a lot more than what it is doing at this point of time. And it comes as a breath of fresh air to hear a CEO from the industry actually saying this. So while I think he captured most of the developments of the industry, I think I will sum that up in basically three themes. The first theme is that in a market like India, the pharma industry is essentially it's a hyper genericized market where the products do not differentiate. And over a period of time, as products have stopped differentiating, pharma is losing out its ability to kind of look for the kind of growth that it should ideally get. We seem to be happy to get the same, kind of 10-15% growth, and we're not looking at actually moving beyond that and questioning how the next level of growth might come in. And a lack of product differentiation kind of is a drag on that growth. And if that is going to happen, then the shift that must happen is towards getting the patient at the center of all decisions, or make the patient. And why the patient becomes the center of all decisions is because things have changed. Patients are far more empowered today than they were in the past because of the internet, because of knowledge that is available. And so therefore those patients are now more in a position to make the decisions for themselves. So as healthcare becomes participative and personalized, I think pharma needs to acknowledge those changes and bring the patient at the center of the strategy. If it doesn't, and it continues to be product centric, then essentially pharma will be relegated to being supplying company, a supply chain company, and like Sanjiv said, large chunks of the industry are actually being taken away by companies that are coming up in parallel, like the digital health companies, where knowledge is being given, services are being seen as the model, and it's not anything. It's actually complementary to the industry. The second thing is services have percolated far beyond the in the last few years, largely because they ride on the back of technology driven models. So a digital first approach to patient centricity is actually allowing patient centricity to percolate down in the manner that it should be, in the sense that there is transparency, there is open access to information, there is a full democratization of product, service, and information, and therefore patients are at liberty to make informed choices about their own health. And that's kind of a paradigm shift that pharma is not adjusting itself to. And I think the third large theme that Sanjiv spoke about is how then does the pharma industry shift from being a product-centric industry to a services-centered or a patient-centered industry? To be able to understand how to do this, the conundrum with most senior managements in pharma companies is that we have invested so much in product research, we have invested so much in distribution networks, and we have invested so much in product itself, that I don't think a change from that service model or a pivot from that business model is called for, or something that we want to attempt getting at. And so therefore, I think that the answer to that lies in collaboration. As business models on the internet become platform in nature, where multiple suppliers will service multiple buyers, where companies don't have to own all the capabilities to service the patients or to create a service model. There are enough companies outside that specialize in doing this, and all it takes for pharma to understand is that for a health consumer, as Sanjiv called a patient, a health consumer, we stop talking about them as a patient and we talk about them as a health consumer. A health consumer does not merely require a medicine or a pill or a liquid or a syrup or an injection or something like that. They need much, much more than that. And how do we give them much more than that? Through collaboration, by bringing in, by creating a health ecosystem or a wellness ecosystem. Because if you treat the person at the center of it as a human being and not as a person who is sick, then you start to see all the needs that this person requires in his life. Maybe it could be anything from clothes, gym membership, subscriptions, to information websites, videos, communities, apps, digital therapeutics apps, whatever, everything that it takes for that person to stay healthy, to delay the onset of disease, and then once the disease sets in, manage it effectively for a longer and a healthier life. So I think I want to kind of sum up Sanjeev's excellent talk on these three themes. One, where pharma needs to understand that it should move from product centricity to a service model. Second, understand that digital is being driven. This is the basic need on which these services models will come up. And so therefore embed technology as a very important part of the pharma strategy. And the third thing is, even if you do not have all the capabilities to pivot your business model, look at collaborations, look at a platform-based model, and think about how you can partner to deliver great services or great products and services or everything that a person needs, not a patient, but a health consumer.
Thank you, Salil, for summing up that. I couldn't have done it better. So Aparna, listening to a CEO talk, making a business case actually for companies to use both digital and patient centricity as an important aspect of their future. How do you look at what Sanjiv had to say?
So first of all, it's music to my ears. Clearly this is what we hope industry would move towards. I think that the key model, if you really look at it from the patient point of view, it's not, I think, to be honest, most patients are not looking to become consumers actually. What they want is a process and an ecosystem that allows for shared decision making. And eventually we might get to supported decision making, but as a start, I see it more as a demand or a request for shared decision making, which means that in order for them to be able to make that transition to being shared decision makers, that's where pharma can play a role and industry can play a role, because one is, of course, health literacy is increasing, but we need to make sure that we don't leave, we don't migrate people from being without information to having bad information. In health, unfortunately, the consequences of poor information has significant consequences. So I think, again, promoting and supporting health literacy in a very moderated, directed way is possible. And that's where, I really do believe that pharma can play a role. We should not, so if we look at it, and we work largely in the space of chronic diseases, and if you look at it from the patient, if you're really listening to the patient, you have to look at the patient's journey. And when you look at it from the patient's journey, you realize that the needs of the patient varies at various points. So again, it's not a question of, what you give at the point of diagnosis, or just putting together a bunch of content that goes out on, to promote branding of pharma. But it's about looking at it as to what that patient needs, what that patient needs at the point of, say, discharge at the hospital, right? So for instance, in the last few years, at least after a knee replacement or a hip replacement, there is now understanding that there needs to be some physiotherapy. But the same thing does not extend to a lot of other conditions. Post-stroke patient gets very little information, for instance, on what support they will need, what are the things to watch out for. The other thing we seem to have in the whole information that we are putting out is to only restrict information to what is positive. We seem to think that if we tell the patient about potential side effects, they will, not take the drug, or they will not adhere to the treatment protocol. And time and again, we find that that is what causes a lot of the challenges, because when they don't know what to expect in especially chronic diseases, then they look outside. Then they do go back to their doctors, and doctors often are, again, because you need to look at a team approach, right? So I'll take an example, just stick with that stroke example. If that person has been operated on by a neurosurgeon, that neurosurgeon has lost interest after that stroke. So the follow-up care needs to go back to a cardiologist, a neurologist, sometimes a psychiatrist. And those are the things, apart from a physiotherapist and speech therapist, etc. But those are the elements that the family struggles to figure out. And those are things that, as Sanjiv said, that it's not rocket science to put together the solution architecture of what a stroke patient would need. And then, if you have that, if you have a protocol, or you have discharge information, you make sure that the patient understands it, and support the doctors who are clearly overwhelmed by providing that information. So it's not leaving it to chance for that caregiver to search online, ask in various communities, and they know where exactly to go to. So even now, and again, going back to oncology, when I ask oncologists what are the websites they refer patients to, they will still say cancer.gov in the US, right? Why can't we come up with a credible site which is local, which is which meets the needs of the Indian patient in local languages, so that again it addresses accessibility of information in a way that people understand, right? So if you really look at it from the patient point of view, and we look at how to enable better decision making by the patient, then exactly what is going to be required. And if you again work with those patients to listen to them, map out their journeys, it's not impossible. It is doable. Yes, it's the scale of India and the differences of literacy levels, etc., will need to be catered to. You will find some people like written communication, others like video information, and so on. But those are things that I think once the intent is there, the rest can follow. So to me, I'm still seeing an issue with not enough intent, or not enough okay, I think the intent is there, or the stated intent is there, but there's not enough muscle behind that stated intent of trying to move forward. And if, as Sanjiv says, pharma does realize that, look, if you don't do this, all you end up becoming a supply chain manufacturing company. And I actually think it's sad, because there is so much expertise there. There is all of that effort of the hard work has been done in that research and creating those, molecules or whatever the new immunotherapy drugs, etc. This is, in some sense, an easier challenge. So if you put a bit more effort into it, it can be achieved. There are finite pathways that we need to work through. And the other thing I think is also, while we want patients to be empowered, we also I think should look at how to empower patient communities so that they can, in a way, like the task shifting model, right? So we have so much to do in chronic disease management. So why not leverage patient communities to support each other, to take care of the psychosocial needs, to take care of the day-to-day questions. A lot of that, we find that if the group is created and moderated and curated properly, then it actually reduces the burden on the healthcare system, and it improves, and I hate the word compliance, it improves adherence to the treatment protocol. Because often, yes, they'll talk to each other, they'll ask about this alternative therapy, etc. But I think if they're part of that cohort, they tend to at least make sure that they're following through on the treatment guidelines.
Thank you, Aparna. That was very insightful. You talked about shared decision making, and I fully agree with you. And I think that's where pharma will have to work a lot, even in sensitizing doctors who still hold on to their reins of power. They don't like Google-powered patients or patients who do the Google search and come, but that's going to be the norm. So the patient will have to be taken, because at the end of the day, it's his body and his life. And we have only seen it in COVID with the vaccine hesitancy becoming a movement by itself. It's so much important, to have that shared decision making, and that shared decision making can happen when we improve the overall health literacy. Because right now, as you said, even when there is patient groups, there is a lot of crosstalk about alternate therapies and so many other things. So the health literacy has to go up, so patients get the right information at the right time where they need it. And also you said about mapping the patient's journey and giving a very good example of the stroke patient, which should be a good talking point for Sudip, because you're in the neurosciences area and you are dealing with the stroke patients. So I think Aparna has brought about some really good points. And finally, empowering the patient communities. And I think, Salil, you'll remember that in our last CEO of Roundtable, both the vice president of Lupin and Glenmark, both of them talk about the need for patient communities as well, pharma pitching in. So I think there is a definite forward movement of the needle from the time we last met. So over to you, Amlesh, what are your takeaways or your insights into and your thoughts on Sanjeev's keynote?
Yeah, it has always been so very inspiring to listen to Mr. Navangul, and once again, it's heartening also when industry leaders talk this language. Then obviously it echoes across. Not only among those who are in a position to take decision and who are going to influence things as we move in the industry, but also those who are going to get into those positions, those who are in somewhere midway. And at an impressionable time, when they hear to such, such forward-looking thoughts and statements, it's really something that to be look forward to. And thanks a lot, Salil, for capturing the essence so beautifully. And Aparna, not only picking up some of the nuggets from Mr. Navangul's talk, but also adding her vast, knowledge and expertise and experience in this field so beautifully well. And I'll pick up from where Aparna left somewhere in the end. Pharma should not become a supply chain company, and that that is something what right in the beginning when Mr. Navangul said it's a reality. If you don't change yourself, then you will be relegated to doing something that you will possibly not love to do as an industry. And time is now. And for that to be avoided, very rightly, he said that technology is not just an enabler. And someone like Salil has been going around for years together now, making everybody understand that, and Anupa has been a catalyst in that, that please make it a way of life. I mean, it's the way. Because if all your stakeholders and the larger stakeholders that he was mentioning about, not just the patients and the doctors and the distributors, it's a much bigger ecosystem now. And all the players in that ecosystem, I mean, I would say that I don't know whether all of us have learned to partner with even the hospitals. Leave aside beyond that. I don't know whether all of us have learned to partner with the governments. Some very absolutely adjacent. They are there in our ecosystem. They are much bigger stakeholders in our system than we are actually, if you look very, very closely, even from economy point of view. So he very rightly said that, partnership is the way. You cannot do everything on your own. And if you have to do that, you have to acceptance, and startup culture is what you say. He said that even if you do not have anything significant that you need to produce or sell, you keep on working on something new. What is that new business model will not keep us being a supply chain player rather than and become a true solution provider. And one such a remarkable thing that he mentioned, that why don't you try to become the Netflix of one therapy area? Why not? Yes, indeed. I mean, that's how it is the way to go. You don't enter more often than not. You don't enter a particular area with just one product, and any which ways you don't enter with just the product. Have their solutions. Let there be services. So it's a bundle rather than just one brand or one product. And he touched about the patient consumerism. I will tell you that about even 10-12 years back, the moment Apollos and Columbia Asias and Fortises started becoming big, it was about 10-12 years back, if you go back. The healthcare consumerism was taking roots around that time. And I used to go and sit in the canteens of these beautiful canteens of this, particularly that Fortis Mohali or many other such corporate hospitals. And I'll get into chatting mode with some of those patients and their caregivers. And I'll ask them, so what appeals to you when you come here and, you don't go to that clinic next door or that smaller hospital? And they say, look, there is enough parking area. It's an AC environment. I will come, I'll bring now Chunnu Munnu for his vaccination, and I'll get my Chunnu Munnu's mummy also get checked up. Okay. And after all that will be done, we will have a nice lunch in the beautiful cafeteria that they have got. So, and it kept on impacting the hospitals, and they kept on doing very well. And I'm really a big fan of all these big chains. Many of them are doing excellent work, and it was about to move into our zone also, and it kept on moving in our zone. And now it's, as he very nicely concluded, that patient consumer will drive the behavior. It's already driving the behavior. If you are not willing to change, then loss is yours and not that of the patients, really. And it's incumbent upon us. If you are in healthcare, if you are in life sciences, if you are in well-being, if you do not contribute, if you only sell, then there is something grossly wrong with the basic philosophy itself. then choose some other industry. So thanks a lot. It was, great listening to Mr. Sanjiv and to Aparna and also to Salil. Thank you.
Thank you, Amlesh. Thank you very much. Yes, we have to see the patient as a consumer, and you so well brought it out that when a patient comes to Apollo or any of those hospitals, right from the entry, the ambience itself is reassuring. And one doesn't really feel as a patient, but rather as a consumer, because there are so many other facilities which make that experience, as Salil always likes to say. I think, Salil, it's a good point that, Amlesh has given a new twist to this customer experience, that when if the patient himself comes to the hospital, he's anticipating something beyond the treatment, something beyond the pricks that he gets from the doctor or the nurse. He's also going to enjoy the good meal, and he knows that his car is safe as well. That's a wonderful perspective, but we don't look at these hygiene factors as important. So thank you, Amlesh, for those insights.
Thank you.
Over to you, Sudip. I know that you're sitting there in Brussels. It's so nice of you to join us, and tell us what's the time there, first of all, so we have more empathy with you.
No. It's earlier than you, so it's still 3.5 hours behind India. So it's just about 2:15. So it's nice. It's only that it's cold and cloudy as usual. We're getting into the end of autumn, so it's a bit of a challenge. If you're from Mumbai, used to seeing sun almost every day, which you don't get to see here. So thank you very much, Anup and Salil and all the panelists, and of course Mr. Navangul. Indeed, a very good conversation and discussion here. One of the things that I would like to mention is everybody mentioned it actually, that why a patient or patient's caregiver or payer will have more information, and why nobody should be insecure about it. Because if you don't want them to know, then only thing in India you have to do is take their phone away, which you can't do. Okay, as long as she or he has the phone, she or he always will have the information. Okay, so let's move ahead with that and accept that reality and the transformation that has happened thanks to mobile and then subsequently internet. And we should build on that. And something that I mentioned in DIPA 1 was when we are planning our business model, okay, and which needs to change. Are we planning our business model based on internet services? And those services are so nominal in India. Is it very difficult to build a service model based on internet services? And we already seen so much of advancement of telemedicine. I remember, I was doing an awareness program back in Guwahati in 2016, and we were trying to connect a startup from Bangalore on epilepsy prediction to Guwahati. In fact, outskirts of Guwahati. The district magistrate of Guwahati actually said, okay, I'll give you internet free or the connectivity free. How? Because they use VSNL, not BSNL, VSNL as internet provider, which probably is the fastest internet provider in India. Okay, not Jio or anybody else, but they are the fastest internet provider. So that services were available, but we are not using it. So my first point would be that build model based on internet services, and then do the 4A very well. Now, what do I mean by 4A? Something that Aparna mentioned is awareness, access, availability, and the actors, something that we talked about, partnership. I'm talking about all the actors, whether it's governments, non-government organizations, and all the other players that are there in the market. Can we create more usage of those 4As? Use of technology to free up routine tasks and make room for empathetic care. That is something is so important for patients. And we have seen it in so many examples. I think all of us know in our journey in Indian pharma, so many examples of how important it is for empathetic care. Is it just about the treatment, or we know for sure that it's much more beyond treatment, which is quality of life, which is productivity of the person. Okay, and mental health is a big issue in today's healthcare management. This empathetic care will drive, to my mind, a lot of personalized care. So if we are talking about personalized care, that means we will have to use standard algorithms and decision trees. So technology becomes so much more important for those. Then finally, integrating data, and we have seen during the COVID time how real world data has driven the vaccine rollouts, etc. So we have so much of data available. How are we integrating those data and creating meaningful outcome and impact for the patient? And the last point that I would like to say, okay, India is becoming a more specialist market, specialists market. Every kid who goes to the medical college wants to become a specialist. What happens to primary care physician? Now, if we use technology, probably we will help prepare better primary care physicians for future. And I think as an industry, we should help to create better HCPs for future, because as community and as population, we need more primary care physicians. Of course, we need the specialist care, but we also need a lot of primary care physicians, as Aparna mentioned in her example, that once the neurosurgeon does the surgery and then he's not interested anymore, and then you actually get into a chain of specialists. Finally, 3-4 years down the line, the patient has to be managed by a primary care physician. Okay, do we have enough? And if we look at Mumbai, I don't see enough primary care physicians. There are not enough young primary care physicians. Most of the primary care physicians are in their mid-50s, mid-60s. So that is something I think is as an industry, we need to move towards and develop a model which will help overall management of the patient journey. The other point I would like to say, which I think is very close to my heart, when we talk about patient-centric, patient centricity, I would talk more about patient value. So if I think of myself, what is the value I get or I drive or derive as patient? So when I think of whether it's a product or a portfolio or anything, do I keep the patient value in mind and create my strategy around how the solution should be brought to the patient? Now, I think what Mr. Navangul mentioned, that's where the difference will be when you move from a product strategy to more a patient value strategy. So that I think is what I would like to see happening. Again, I say that there are a lot of examples of patient value strategies. Industry is full of brand plan strategies, right? We do every year brand plannings. But if we can actually change the mindset and the cultural change that Mr. Navangul mentioned, and talk about patient value strategy, it will bring value to the patient, hence to the whole ecosystem, and finally to the organization who is coming out with the solution.
Thank you, Sudip. That was a very insightful comment that you can't take the mobile phone away. And as long as you can't take the mobile phone away, you can't stop having a patient who's constantly looking up in the mobile phone as to what his condition is and what are the options available. And he may not get the right information. So the challenge is, as Aparna rightly said, is to increase the health literacy and also to see how we can give localized information that is relevant to the patient in his language and his. So Sanjiv, as you can see that your keynote has stirred a lot of thoughts. It's triggered a lot of thoughts for us to chew on, and so that we can work on these solutions. You are part of DEPA 1 as well. You shared your insights as to it's not just digital, but technology as a whole needs to be leveraged by companies. And you gave your example from your own experience even 10 years back, where you leverage technology by way of call centers to be able to cater to more dialysis patients than instead of increasing the number of nurses. So I think that is something that pharma and everybody else has to do, is that we can't increase the number of, say, primary care physicians, but how do we increase their access? From the last time you spoke, Sanjiv, what are some of the key changes that you see in the patient world, in the pharma world, in healthcare as a whole, that is driving, as you said, the change in consumer behavior, and what's its impact going to be on healthcare industry, specifically the pharma industry, from last year to this year? How do you see the needle has moved in terms of patient centricity and patient care?
So, Anup, that's a very important point, that how much is changing. And, it's about perception, and it's also about standards. So for me, always it is not enough. But what has changed, let me put it this way, is in a simplistic way, is that, look, I have done enough, let's say, pharmacoeconomic studies or socioeconomic studies to tell you the cost of treatment in a country like India. And in the cost of treatment in India, you would be shocked that many a times the drug cost is only 10% of the treatment cost, or 5% of the treatment cost. The math makes 15. In Western countries, many a times it is 15 or 20%. So there are other things, doctor's fees, there is, but more importantly, there is other costs, transport, time. Somebody who is an economic generator traveling along with the patient. These are costs. There are hidden costs and there are obvious costs. And then you take the cost of treatment, it is much more than what you see. One thing that is changing is, I think patients are able to access doctors slightly more better than yesterday by technology. So the unnecessary waste of resources, time, and money is probably going to come down over a period of time. And there is benefit seen on both sides. So on one hand, that is working well. On the other hand, e-pharmacies are now able to, or technology-driven platforms are able to deliver medicines to the patient's doorstep in a much easier way, because there are many delivery companies that have started, which is a very different model. So that is working fine. If you just connect technology to doctor's prescription to the supplier provider, which Apollo tried to do many years ago, but if that connectivity is done, then imagine a patient can sit at home, take a consultation, doctor can do the prescription on the computer, transfers to the pharma, platform pharmacy, and the drug is delivered. So that is where I feel we are now building an ecosystem which looks easier and very close to a solution. What solution is not coming through is what Aparna mentioned, is actually been a bane for a very long time, is there are very basic requests or needs of a patient to be participating in the whole process, to understand what's happening and what needs to be done, and to have somebody who can explain little more compassionately than a doctor can do. That bridging would solve a major gap, and that is where probably I think pharma companies need to step in and say, look, I'm ready to help you through this part, because that will bridge the gap between doctor and the patient, where there is a gap, and that gap will remain because of the social status that this country affords to gives to doctors, or in many countries, but in India in particular, let's say. So if that is bridged, you solve a major issue of patient knowing where to go to. And how do you build ecosystem around to say that how patients can talk to fellow patients? You mentioned about dialysis. I can tell you, in the same experiment we had done many years ago, that outside a doctor's chamber, we used to keep a counselor who was a dialysis patient. And the dialysis patient used to then talk to the new person who has been told to get on dialysis. and make the person comfortable. And we would see that not the doctor, but the dialysis patient would psychologically convert the patient better. Today, technology can enable me to create groups so much more easier, but then it doesn't require so much effort as much as it requires intent. So that change is probably still some way away. These are the small things that are some way away. If those are taken up by the industry and those gaps remain, otherwise it will happen the way I was dealing with a Bangalore-based startup where in women's health, where I was asking them, oh, what's your platform, what are you going to do, and can you work with us and partner on these? They told us, look, we are in this game, we understand technology, we understand our customer. We don't know what you do. You please make a presentation to us and we will judge you whether you are worthy of our partnership. I had gone there with my own ego saying that we are a big company, we will tell you what to do and all. And that small startup brushed me aside saying that you please defend yourself and first prove that you are worthy of a partnership. So there is opportunity available. I have to eat the humble pie and ensure that I go to those partners and work through these solutions. Ensure that we provide solution to the patient. It doesn't matter what standing we have in the marketplace or what kind of company we run or what is the size of the place. It is irrelevant because that individual customer or the patient is important. And then I must go out and partner that. So there is that mild connectivity that is happening. So if we are able to join all this, imagine at least at a basic level, I'm not even talking of big models, at a basic level, a patient gets the treatment he or she deserves and gets it in the right form quickly with all the basic needs of the patient being taken care of. So that is where we are moving, probably in a little better shape than where we were last year. There are still some gaps. Hopefully we see intent somewhere or the other. So this gap will get closed in the next some time. That's where I feel we are.
Great. Nice to hear that. There are a lot of startups coming who are actually impacting the ecosystem. And we need to be humble enough to admit that there are some people who have better understanding of what the patient's needs are. And I think you said very clearly that the intent is very important. It should be music to Salil's ear because his model is based on, begins with the intent, content, strategy, and then the skills that are required to execute those strategies. So a lot of food for thought, Amlesh. I'm sure that last year you gave us a wake-up call by saying that it's not sufficient to be patient-centric, but your entire model has to be centered around the patient so that he is the reason for you to be in healthcare. And I always like the values that you talk about is that healthcare is first a responsibility and then the business opportunity. So what changes you have seen from the last year when COVID came in and disrupted so much of our entire way of living and much more healthcare? What are the changes that you have seen, both positive and some of them may not be so positive?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for recalling healthcare is first a responsibility. I think for the last 10 years, I've been using that quotation right in the beginning. I really mean it. And that's the truth that we must keep in mind. So I look at changes, from 3-4. First of all, at the physician level, if you see, the acceptance for virtual is at a much higher level. With all due to it's not that nothing was happening in our industry. If you go back 17, 18, 19, and even Salil and you would have seen, there were still maybe few of the players, few of the industry companies who were trying to do something, but they were trying to do something. And it's they who, a lot of a struggle was there in acceptance for that. So while access restrictions were there for the reps, but the emails were still not getting opened. If some webinar or something is there, and if a speaker has not been able to turn up and you get it online, there was still he could as well have come sort of a refrain you get. But the acceptance has been, has gone multifold thanks to unfortunate circumstances which has happened. And those who were ready within the industry, those who were already doing it, obviously they have moved to, they could scale it up at a much faster pace, while others have joined the bandwagon. And there are clearly advantages are there. And of course, that acceptance has also got reflected in how the patient consultations have happened, how the, even over phone or over video chat. And many of you see Apollo hospitals was getting mentioned. I also mentioned they had a telemedicine thing. 10, 12 years back, very robust telemedicine center was there in Hyderabad or Chennai somewhere, and they were trying to do something, and there was a huge struggle because I was also very closely watching, and I was talking to them. But then again, all that has gone into overdrive, and that acceptance is there at the physician level. The second thing that is there, the culture of health. Very recently I wrote that article. Yes, we need infrastructure, we need more healthcare professionals, we need all that is there, but we need more budgetary allocation also. But first, we need a culture of health. If you examine ourselves, if you examine the people around us and talk to them about health, today vis-a-vis what you might have talked some time back, there is a huge difference. So there is a culture of health, and I only hope and pray that we don't go back to our old ways and we continue building on that further. The third thing I would say that, number of things, again, I would say in digital things were happening, but it were happening on a digital health level. Pharma had one white paper some time back where they talked about, from tactical to strategic is what they mentioned. And the first level was digital health, which is at awareness, education, and so on and so forth. There is a second level, which is digital medicine, where biomarkers come into the play, the clinical outcome analysis come into the play, which is essentially at the physician level. But then even there, it was not happening. It has happened there. It has moved to the next level, which is the digital therapeutics level. Good number of work has happened. May not be in India. We have not seen much of that. Some are still here, but then outside a huge work has happened. And you have a number of companies who have established a separate business unit. Somebody has called it an innovation lab, somebody has called something else, but that business sits outside of normal. It's not an addendum. Okay, so digital therapeutics is still at the adjunct level. That's one change has happened. Of course, it is finally the fourth level that that white paper was talking about, was when you are able to have a software-based or technology-based solution bundled along with the product, co-labeled, co-approved, and presented into the market like one product. So even there, the industry has gone globally. I'm sure all those things have happened. It will eventually percolate down to us. So I see that from tactical to strategic journey has definitely happened. Still a long distance, but these are the three changes that I see at physician, patients, and then at ourselves, that is the industry level.
Thank you, Amlesh. I think, yes, we did some time back a very detailed article in MedicinMan about the impact of digital therapeutics. And there are companies, I have been on platform where the CEO of Weldy was there, and they have a FDA approved digital therapeutic. I was with the Bioformis, and they have collaborated with Novartis too, and shown actually when the digital therapeutic and Entresto in particular was given, the adherence, as Aparna would like us to say, went up dramatically, and therefore the treatment outcomes were much better. So it is definitely the ecosystem of pill plus services like digital therapeutics that's going to impact patient care. So before I come to you, Aparna, let us hear what Sudip has to say, so that the last word is to you after listening to all the industry people. Sudip, your thoughts on how things have changed in the last 1 year.
So I'll give you a bit of a perspective what we have seen in Europe. Okay, so again, the adoption can happen. There in India, and in many ways we see the disparity in awareness, access, affordability, etc. Even in Europe. So when you look at Central and Western Europe versus Eastern part of Europe. There is similar kind of disparity you see. But one thing that we are observing here is that there is a conversation that is happening between body versus life. Okay, and I'm saying it in a larger context because something that Amlesh mentioned. Why would I like to go to a hospital or a corporate hospital versus a single clinic? Because it probably encompasses life more than the body. Okay, so that discussion is happening quite deep, and then strategic teams across organizations are talking about body versus life story. What is it that we need to do to take the next step, body versus life? So is it only about the treatment? Is it only about health and disease, and then that's it? Or are we talking about life at a large? Okay, what all things have happened? I know classical examples are suddenly the property rates in Belgium has gone up significantly because a lot of people are buying houses who were living in cities are buying houses outside the cities because you don't no more need to come to office. So people are moving away from cities to the suburban areas. What will happen to all the offices that we have? So there is this discussion happening between this one. The other thing that is happening is collective versus individual. In Europe, we also already have treatment or healthcare as part of social paradigm, or the countries provide that, or governments provide that. But what about the individualism? Because if you really have to go to get a, we have heard all those examples. People wait long, 3 months, 4 months to get a knee operation done or a back surgery done. So hence you have a lot of those medical tourism happening to India because they don't get it there because they're in the queue. They hence come to India and get the treatment done. So that discussion is happening from collective to individual paradigm. So these two are very important, and we are seeing when companies are trying to launch product or preparing to launch product. Fortunately, we are in the process of launching a product in a very crowded market in dermatology in UCB. And then we are preparing to launch products in 2-3 years time in rare disease scenario. Now, when we are looking in both these spaces in a very crowded competitive market versus a rare disease scenario, we see that if we are talking about the collectivism or collective treatment paradigm, that is not going to work for us. Okay, so that two things are being talked very, very in very details in terms of getting into the deeper meaning. How does it mean? What changes have happened? Okay, and everything is aligned to that.
Great. I think that goes with what Salil was saying, is that we are not just treating a sick patient, but after he gets treated, what about the latter part of it, the wellness part of it? That how does he enjoy life? Again, that's very, very important. So great points for you to Aparna to give the closing comments after you heard the industry people on how the things are changing, or rather digital is impacting patient care, and what are the new trends that you are seeing from the last time that we spoke.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I always go back to what we focus on, which is chronic diseases, right? And which is where 95% of care happens outside the clinical arena. So the part about the treatment and the access to the doctor is critical, but it doesn't consume the patient and the family. The patient and the family is consumed with the day-to-day management of that condition and the care continuum that's happening outside, beyond just the treatment. If I look at what's happened in about, I think it's been a year since we did that session, content is getting generated at a rapid pace, right? I think even Google reports, YouTube reports all say that content is being generated at a rapid pace. The question really is, and going back to, for content to be king, Does it meet the standards? Is it accurate? Is it current? Is it curated? Is it directed? Is it addressing the needs of the different segments? Is it differentiated? COVID was a perfect example. With so much information changing rapidly, we saw how websites struggled to stay up to speed with whatever changes were happening. And it was great lessons in how to manage your platform to make sure that the information is current. How do you make sure that you disseminate that information back to people so that they all have access to the right information? So I think if you look at, again, from content perspective, right now, content is still looking at it as, okay, we will generate content at our convenience. We are not yet looking at how do we create content which is usable by the patient and the family at the time they need it. So is it discoverable? You've got these, and we are part of it. We have webinars. How do we make sure that when somebody actually needs that topic, they can find that information? And that's really the key. How do we, out of all that content, create the useful content for that patient when they need it? So I think that's one element that we still see a gap in terms of, while everybody is creating digital content, how do we make sure that it's really accurate, current, and directed? The other thing, as I keep saying, is we still start conversations by saying, of course, patients will search, but of course they should, because not only is it their right, it's an indication of them wanting to manage their condition better, which is why they're looking for information. So to me, it's the first step of empowerment, right? It's our responsibility as healthcare providers to make sure they get the right content. It's the fact that they look is natural. It's like, using Sanjiv's Netflix example. Netflix is not saying people are finding the wrong information on my site. They are just making sure that the information or whatever they want is there. So, whether you see XYZ show or ABC show, it's still good for them. So I think we've got to change the way we look at this. And again, to the point, I think somebody said that pharma is a responsibility. Healthcare is a responsibility. So when we say that it's, when patients don't get access to good information, to right set of resources, it's not just as though an alternative choice is equally as good. Often it's not. So it's actually bad for the entire society when they don't get access to the right information. And to the point of showing empathy, one of the issues that we find time and time again is the alternative treatments give people the semblance of control over their journey. It gives them a feeling that one, of course, they believe that it's less harmful, but I think, again, that's something that needs to be addressed. The other is that the practitioners spend time engaging with that patient. They listen to that patient for that, your homeopath doctor will spend 45 minutes discussing the color of your tongue. And that makes that patient feel that this person is interested in my health. So, we need to look at these signals and say, what does that really mean? And how do we translate and make sure that patients want to continue with the treatment protocols that are best in their interest, right? And if that means that it's a combination of something plus, and more, there is acknowledgement that there are certain things which are truly complementary. So, we should kind of, as part of that ecosystem that we build, clearly define what is acceptable and what is not acceptable and under what scenarios. So I think, and I kind of digress, but I think it's important really for us to look at, how pharma can be there in that patient journey at the time that that patient needs, and beyond the pill in that sense as well, right? How can they handhold that patient so that they have a better quality of life, so that they can make better decisions, so that they feel supported and don't feel alone? and so that there is as little impact to their livelihood. So I
Great.
think that's where.
Great. Thank you, Aparna. It's always a learning experience listening to you. I think we should have more conversation. Although now, thanks to Twitter, you are very much active there. And I see your responses whenever there is a conversation going on about patients. So, Salil, thank you for being patiently waiting there for your turn to speak. But I think you play a very important role in discussions like this, because it's important for us to have those takeaways, especially for our audience who are looking for what are one or two, three things that, from what these stalwarts have shared, that I can take it back and use it in my, job as a, in the new normal. What's marketing going to look like? So over to you, Salil, for the summary.
Thank you, Anup. So it pays to be patient, I guess, because it gives me an opportunity to listen to fascinating insights from so many senior people in the industry. So it was really nice to hear everyone, lots of new ideas and thoughts from over the high seas from Sudip. Amlesh has been as grounded as always, trying to think about how you can bridge between India and Bharat. And I think Mr. Navangul has always given a very broad futuristic idea of how the industry should move. Aparna has been quite focused on and brought out really good insights about what can actually help patients, and not confuse or conflate that with pharma's agenda. So I think a couple of things that we'd like to wrap this session up with. One, like Sanjiv said, digital is not a medium, it is not something new, it is a way of life. So understanding that and trying to put that into or embed that into our strategy, into pharma strategy, is going to be very, very important. Understanding how technology opens up new avenues of reaching out to people and to create all-round services and products and monetization opportunities for them is going to be a very important part of this. More so because I think pharma's portfolio itself is moving quite uniquely. As we start to look at personalized medicines, gene-based therapies, and a lot of other extremely innovative and new age biological products that are coming out of innovation, maybe not from pharma, but definitely pharma's commercial go-to-market strategy is what is driving this. So the mRNA vaccines that have come out from with Pfizer and so on and so forth, Novartis's therapy on spinal muscular atrophy is a very good example of what kind of products are going to come out. These are going to be cures. Now, people are looking at opportunities for vaccines for HIV. They're going to be looking at opportunities for vaccines for cancer, opportunities for those kind of products, which we never thought of. Microsoft is talking about anti-aging. Google's talking about solutions for neurodegenerative disorders. So fascinating areas of research that are happening. Now, when these products come out, these are going to be not chronic or acute. They're going to be one-shot therapies. You inject it once into the patient's body and that's it. The medicine starts doing its job after that and then carries on for the rest of the life. So for spinal muscular atrophy, typically given at the age between the ages of 0 and 2, and then carries on for the rest of the life. So what does the Novartis field force do? What does pharma do in the interim? Do you just give that one shot and then forget about the patient and not do anything? I think there is a much larger opportunity in tracking those people, in making sure that the therapy is working in the way that it is supposed to, making sure that the data that is coming out of those bodies, are kept, making sure that you track how the patient's life is through the whole lifespan, and then look at long-term effects of the medicine and what you can do to make the life more comfortable and so on and so forth. I think that sort of a change in the business model is going to come. So I think patient centricity is by far going to become more of a default mode as products become more embedded into the lives of patients. It's not about the number. We're going to move away from quantity towards quality, and so therefore there will be a significant change in that. So that if that sort of an environment is going to come, then what is it that an organization needs to do, right? Does our current structure work in that sort of an environment? If we need analytical abilities, if we need content creation abilities, if we require technology-based platforms, if we require a lot of different kinds of skills and capabilities, our current structure of the organization is not going to work. When do we start the change? And I think that is where Sanjiv's point, which I saved for the last, was about entrepreneurship at the CET level, the corporate executive team or the leadership team level, where he spoke about having 7 or 8 people who are especially dedicated to thinking about how business models will emerge, how the company should go into the future and all of that. So I think leading from the top, this is a transformational stage, and this transformation cannot happen at any other level but at the CEO's level. And so from there on, if the vision of the CEO is driven through understanding how this is going to pan out in the next 20-30 years, he will probably lead the organization onto restructuring, building the right capabilities, getting that culture within the organization, helping people understand what they have to do, realigning perverse incentive structures. Right today, I don't think anybody is happy enough to be judged only on sales, but they have no alternative. Right? I don't think there are companies which really take customer experience very seriously. I don't think people take patient satisfaction or health outcomes very seriously. They're not embedded into our incentive systems. We don't get bonuses based on this. So all those changes can't happen at the middle management or the junior management. They have to happen at the CXO level. And I think that's where Sanjiv's point becomes extremely critical, that it is the CEO who leads that vision. He constitutes a group of very senior executives to drive this change into the organization, to embed the culture into this organization and prepare for digital transformation. So I hope more power to Sanjiv, and I hope that there are many other CEOs who learn from this, and that this becomes a norm in the industry. And going forward, all the wonderful perspectives and ideas that all of you brought out will be very good food for thought for people in the industry. And I really thank all of you for bringing up all these very interesting perspectives.
Great. Thank you, Salil. And it's time to unmute yourselves. And for the final remarks that all of you can, I especially want to thank Sanjiv for being so accessible. So today's digital world, I send a message to Sanjiv on Twitter handle, and he responds very quickly and has always been accessible. I think I wish more CEOs were so accessible. As you rightly said, Salil, this is a transformational issue and has to be driven by the CEOs, and they need to have a team of people at the top who are driving the agenda. Thank you, Amlesh, for being a partner with MedicinMan for the last 10 years journey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sudip, and thank you finally, Aparna, for taking your time out and joining us in this conversation. Special thanks to Salil for being there always. So thank you, one and all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.